Some men fear getting old. Losing their strength, their hair, their place in the world. But me? I feared silence. Not the good kind, not the peaceful hush of a sunset or a sleeping child. I'm talking about the heavy kind, the silence that settles after laughter is gone. After trust is broken. After someone you love looks at you like a stranger. Good morning, friends. My name is Charles Emery, and folks in the little town of Briar Hollow, Kentucky, just call me Old Chuck. I'm 70 now, with a back that complains more than my mother used to and a heart that's seen too much and still keeps ticking. Before I start my story, tell me in the comments, how many people live in your house now? Kids, grandkids, maybe even great-grandkids. Or are you like me, with more photos on the mantle than voices in the kitchen? I love reading your stories. They remind me that I'm not just talking into the wind. If this story moves you, please give it a like and subscribe. Hit that bell so you don't miss the next chapters. Every click is like a knock on my front door, letting me know someone's still listening. Now, let me take you back to 1982. I was a father, a husband, a man with grease under his nails and big plans in his head. I ran a little auto shop on Main Street, right across from Nellie's Diner. Life was simple, not easy. But it was mine. I had a daughter, June. Smart as a whip, red curls like her mama, and a laugh that could make your worst day feel like the 4th of July. She was 16 that summer, all elbows and opinions, and I swore she was born 40 years old. But Lord, I loved that girl. I still do. My wife, Eleanor, was the glue. The quiet kind of strong. The kind of woman who could fix a torn shirt, a bad mood, or a broken man, all before breakfast. She passed 6 years ago. Cancer. The kind that gives you time but no mercy. But I'm not here to tell you a story about death. No. This is a story about betrayal. About the kind of pain that doesn't show up in X-rays or autopsy reports. It began, as these things often do, on a normal day. I was changing the oil on a customer's pickup, Hank Mulder's old Ford, when June came storming into the garage with fire in her eyes. "Daddy," she said, "you got a minute?" I wiped my hands, nodded. "Always for you, Bug." She looked around, made sure no one else was near. "It's about Mom." And just like that, the floor shifted. "What about your mother?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She hesitated. That wasn't like June. She never hesitated. She's been meeting someone. Not like a friend. More like, secret. Like she's hiding something. Now listen, I'm not a jealous man. Life with Eleanor had always been solid. We weren't fiery or dramatic. We were routine. Comfortable. But there was something in June's eyes that chilled me. I could have laughed it off. Could have said, "Oh honey, you watch too much TV." But something in my gut, that old mechanic's intuition, told me to shut up and listen. "Where?" I asked. "The old Methodist cemetery," she whispered. "Every Thursday morning." I followed her once. She sits on a bench with some man. They talk. Sometimes she cries. That silence I feared. It fell between us right then. Thick. Heavy. And I felt it, the first tiny crack in the life I thought I knew. I didn't sleep that night. Sat in the kitchen, drinking coffee black as soot, staring out the window at the old oak in the yard. Its leaves trembled in the wind, like my hands. My mind clung to reason, maybe June was wrong. Maybe it was just an old friend. Or a brother from church. But I knew. Deep down, I knew. Eleanor and I had been together for 27 years. I could tell her mood just by the sound of her steps. And lately, something had changed. She'd grown distant, like she was speaking to me from behind a closed door. That morning, I pretended everything was fine. We ate oatmeal, I read the paper, she stared at her tea without noticing it had gone cold. Everything all right, Elle? I asked, not looking up. Of course, Chuck. Just thinking. I nodded. The lie in her voice was quiet. Not cowardly, sorrowful. Like someone lying more to themselves than to me. That day, I let my assistant leave early and walked to the park behind the old cemetery. I'm no spy. Never was the kind to snoop. But this wasn't someone else's business. This was my family. I stood behind the fence, near a willow tree. The sun filtered through its branches, scattering light across the gravel paths. At 10 sharp, she came. Walking slowly, in that light coat she wore to church. Her hair pulled back, her step, like a schoolgirl trying not to seem late. He was already there. A man in his 50s, gray at the temples, with a face you'd forget 5 seconds later. And that's what bothered me. He looked like a background character. But his eyes, there was too much interest in them. They sat on the bench by the angel statue. I couldn't hear them, but I saw the gestures. He took her hand, she didn't pull away. She looked at him with a tenderness I hadn't seen in months. She spoke, he nodded, and then, she cried. Not sobbing, just tears slipping down her face. I didn't step out. Wanted to, yes. But I didn't know what I'd bring with me, anger. Accusation. Or just a broken question, why? I stood there until they rose and walked away in different directions. He headed to the parking lot. She walked toward the bus stop. She came home an hour later, like from any casual stroll. I entered the house a bit later, pretending I'd just come back from the shop. Did you go for a walk? I asked as she hung up her coat. Yes, just through the park. The air felt clean today, she said, not meeting my eyes. Hope you don't catch a chill, I replied, and for the first time, I felt it, a lie between us, thick and invisible, with the weight of someone I no longer recognized. That evening, June came into the workshop. Well? She asked quietly. I nodded. She understood. She came over and hugged me from behind. You want me to stop talking about it? I looked at my hands, grease still under my nails. My head was empty. My heart, heavy. No, June. We're going to talk. But first, I need to understand who I'm living with. The next morning, I pulled out an old photo album. The first year of our marriage. Me holding Eleanor on the porch of our first apartment. Us by a campfire, the night I told her I loved her. June, little and sticky with ice cream. Eleanor laughing, alive. Real. And that's when I knew, I had to find out who this man was. How long this had been going on. I needed to be sure before I tore our life apart. Because once you speak certain words, you can't unsay them. And I'm too old to throw them around like a hot-headed kid. The next day, I drove over to see Brendan, my old friend and a retired cop. We'd been fishing together for 20 years, and sometimes shared a bottle when life gave us more to forget than to remember. Brendan retired about 5 years back, but he still had connections. More importantly, he still had a sharp mind. You look like someone sat on your throat, he said as I stepped onto his porch. Worse, I replied. I've got reason to think someone's been visiting my wife. In a way they shouldn't be. He went quiet, then poured us each a cup of coffee. You want me to find him? No. I want you to teach me how to do it, legal, quiet, and without acting like a teenage peeper behind a curtain. He nodded. Within an hour, I knew how to jot down a license plate, how to use public databases, how to quietly figure out where someone worked. Brendan laid it all out calm and clean. No drama, no judgment. I think he understood that if I'd come to him about this, things had already gone too far to ignore. A week later, I was back at the cemetery. Same bench. Same man. Same look. I sat in my truck nearby, watched, waited, and this time got his license plate. The next day, Brendan called. His name's Gerald Mason. 54. Lives in Louisville. Teaches at the university, literature. Widower. No criminal record. No debts. Clean as a choir boy. Something twisted in me. A professor. A poet, maybe. Words, that was his power. I remembered how Eleanor always reached for books, how she once dreamed of being a writer. We used to laugh about it. "Elle, you write better than you cook." And she'd reply, "Writing's easier. Paper doesn't talk back." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept going over it all, what I'd said, what I hadn't, when was the last time I held her hand just because? When did I last compliment her? Tell her I loved her? You see, the real pain of betrayal isn't in the act itself. It's realizing someone else gave your person something you haven't in a long time. I didn't know if they were having an affair. Didn't know if they'd kissed, touched, or just talked. But I knew this, she was sharing something with him that she no longer shared with me. The next morning, I made breakfast myself. Eggs, toast, coffee. Laid it all out on the table and waited for her to wake up. "Chuck," she asked, surprised, walking into the kitchen. "You did all this?" "Yup. Thought I'd make you smile." She sat down carefully, like she expected something more. But I stayed quiet. Just watched her. The little lines by her eyes. The faint tremble in her hands as she reached for the cup. And I realized, everything we ever were, it was still here, somewhere. Just buried. Or forgotten. But do those things come back? Or do we just learn to live with the silence? Tell me, Elle. What do you feel? About us. About yourself. No filter. She looked up. Cautious. Then set the book down and started talking. And I listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't defend myself. Just listened. And it hurt more than I expected. But it felt cleaner. More honest. I started noticing the little things. The kind I used to overlook. How she'd leave the house not just grabbing the first coat off the hook, but choosing the one that flattered her waist. How she lingered at the mirror, smoothing her hair, though she used to scoff at fussing. How she returned, not happy, not guilty, just changed. Like part of her stayed somewhere I couldn't follow. And I kept pretending not to notice. Because I knew, the conversation we were heading toward wasn't just between husband and wife. It was going to be an autopsy. Of our habits, our silences, our years. One morning, over breakfast, I set my spoon down and looked her in the eyes. Not angry. Just steady. "Elle, who is he?" She froze. Her face went still, like stone. Only her eyelashes trembled. "Who?" "The man you meet at the cemetery." "I know, Elle. I was there." She looked down. Stayed quiet a long time. Then placed her hands flat on the table, like surrendering without a fight. "His name is Gerald," she said quietly. "We met at a library book club. He's a widower. We just talk. That's all." "And when's the last time you just talked to me?" Something flickered in her eyes. Not tears, not fear. Weariness, maybe. "I tried, Chuck. I really did. But you always had bolts, engines, customers. I'd talk, you'd nod. But you didn't hear me. Eventually, I stopped talking. Because it hurts to speak into silence." Her words landed harder than any fist. Because they were true. I betrayed her too, not with lies, not with infidelity, but with absence. With neglect. With the kind of distance that looks like routine. Is it an affair? No. I haven't slept with him, if that's what you're asking. And I don't intend to. But maybe it's worse. She looked at me directly. He made me feel alive. He listened. He asked questions. He read things I wrote, things I haven't shown anyone in years. And you haven't looked at me in a long time, Chuck. You look through me. I wanted to argue. To say I loved her, that I cared, that things weren't so simple. But I couldn't. Because I knew what she meant. What I called caring, fixing the sink, keeping her car gassed up, paying bills, it wasn't the same as seeing her. Hearing her. Reaching for her hand just because. Why the cemetery? I asked. Because it's quiet. And people are more honest among the dead. There's no pretending there. Among the graves, the things we bury come back. Silence fell heavy between us. Even the ticking clock held its breath. We sat there, each holding our own ghosts. That night, I went into the garage. Didn't pick up a wrench. Just sat on the old stool, staring at nothing. On the wall hung a photo, me, Elle, and little June with ice cream smeared on her nose. We were laughing. Real, full, together. And I realized, if I wanted even a fraction of that back, I had to do something I'd forgotten how to do. I had to listen. Not fix. Not defend. Just listen. The next day, she was reading on the porch. I walked out and sat beside her. Elle. I said, quietly. Tell me. Everything. What you feel. About us. About yourself. No filter. She looked at me a long time, like she didn't quite believe I meant it. Then she set the book down. And she started talking. And I listened. Through the whole sunset. Through the cracks in her voice. Through the long silences. I listened, because I understood, we might not get another chance. After that talk, the days started moving slower. Eleanor and I lived like two people after a storm, the house still standing, the roof intact, but inside, it smelled of dampness, of quiet, of cracks you couldn't see. We didn't fight. We didn't cry. We just acted like everything was fine. She brewed the coffee a little stronger than usual, and I washed dishes I hadn't touched in 20 years. Small things, maybe. But they were ours. Silent gestures, like reaching across a gap neither of us knew how to name. Sometimes she sat on the porch, legs tucked under her like when we were young. In the evenings, we'd take short walks, just loops around the neighborhood. Like the other old couples, pointing out whose lawn looked better. Once a week, we bought a pie from the bakery and ate it straight from the box, before dinner. It felt like starting over. Not love, maybe. But the beginning of understanding. Still, I knew the ice was thin. Beneath us, years of silence, small resentments, and unspoken hurt. Sometimes I'd catch her staring off into the distance. Not at me, not at the house, but somewhere far away. Maybe in a life where she'd become someone else. Maybe with someone else. I kept drifting into memories. How we met, at a dance in the Veterans Hall, me with ketchup on my shirt, claiming it was grease from work. She laughed, and that was it for me. How I held her hand when June was born. How we built this house ourselves on weekends instead of going to picnics. So much had changed since then, but one thing hadn't, I never knew how to talk about feelings. Only how to show them. One night, after a long, quiet walk, we sat on a bench near the library. I decided to ask. Elle. I said. Do you still think about him? She turned to me. Took her time answering. Sometimes, she said honestly. But not like you probably imagine. I'm not planning to run off. I'm not dreaming of a new life. I felt seen. Heard. Alive. Do you understand? I nodded. Because I did. Even if it hurt. I think about you too, I said. The woman I married. The one I lost, little by little. And do you want her back? Or are you ready to love the one that's left? She got me there. Right to the bone. I didn't know the answer. Just then, June stepped onto the porch, phone in hand, worry in her eyes. Mom, did you call Gerald? Eleanor paled. Yes. I wanted to say goodbye. To tell him I wouldn't be coming anymore. He texted you. You didn't reply. So he messaged me. June held up the phone. A message read, I'm worried about your mother. Her voice sounded like she was saying goodbye forever. Is it really over? Eleanor slowly sat down on the porch step. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said softly. I stayed standing. Not out of anger, but because the ground felt unsteady again. Not from jealousy. From uncertainty. Do you want him gone? I asked. Or are you afraid I'll fall apart if he's still in your thoughts? She looked up at me, tired, but honest. I want to be with you, Chuck. I really do. But I don't know if I can fully let go of what made me feel alive again. That's when I understood, it wasn't about Gerald. Or me. It was about her. After all these years of being a wife, a mother, a caretaker, someone finally saw her as a person again. I sat down beside her. Not for drama. Just because it was too heavy to stand. Then don't decide tonight. Just, stay. With me. Today. Tomorrow. We'll figure the rest out. She nodded. And for the first time in a long while, she laid her head on my shoulder. Not like a wife. Not like someone seeking forgiveness. But like a woman too tired to carry everything alone. Everything changed that night. Quietly, without vows or declarations. She fell asleep next to me, for the first time in months, and her breathing was steady, like someone who finally allowed herself to rest. I couldn't fall asleep right away. I lay there listening to the ticking of the clock, the creaking of the old wardrobe, the soft hum of the fridge from the kitchen. And I thought. I was scared. Not because she might leave, but because, for the first time, I understood that what we have isn't held together by vows, or marriage, or even by June. It's held together by each new day we choose to live together. There's no guarantee she won't wake up tomorrow feeling empty again. That she won't reach for her phone and write to the man who listened when I didn't. But maybe that's what love really is, not eternal loyalty, but the daily choice to stay. In the morning, I woke up before her. Made coffee. Set it on the nightstand next to her book. When she opened her eyes and saw it, she simply smiled. And that smile carried me through the whole day. We started talking more. Not about errands or the weather, but real talk. Like we were learning how to do it all over again. Sometimes it hurt, sometimes it was awkward, but it was always honest. I told her how, 10 years ago, I almost left, when the garage was failing. How I sat in the truck, staring at the train station, thinking about going to Texas, where an old friend ran a mechanic's shop. She listened, didn't interrupt. Then said, I felt like I was losing you back then. But I didn't know how to ask. We started remembering the funny things. How June, at age 3, taped up the dog so he wouldn't be lonely. How I got drunk at her brother's birthday and sang the Belgian national anthem all the way home, without knowing a single word of French. Our laughter was real, warm, easy. But the fear didn't leave. It just got quieter. You could still feel it, in her eyes when the silence came, in my hand as I reached for hers, unsure if she'd take it. One evening, as the sun set and we sat on the porch with tea, she said. Chuck. I wrote to Gerald. I froze. What did you say? That I'm grateful. For the talks, for being there when I was lonely. But I'm coming home. Not because I have to. Because I want to. I didn't say anything right away. Then I said. Thank you. For telling me. You're not angry? No. Because I know what it feels like to talk into silence. And how precious it is to be heard. She took my hand. Firmly. Surely. Just like she did at the hospital the day June was born. And in that moment, I understood, love isn't what you've had. It's what you keep giving. Every day. Even when it's scary. Even when you don't know if it'll be accepted. 2 weeks passed. Life slowly returned to the house, like an old dog creeping back in after a storm. Eleanor and I started talking more. Not long conversations, not dramatic ones, just simple, honest exchanges. It felt like we were standing at a shattered window, trying to decide, fix the house, or let it fall. But neither of us turned away. And that, in itself, was a miracle. June began visiting more often. Sometimes she brought pie, usually store-bought, but always with the genuine intent of spending time together. Other times, she came just for tea, as if to check if we were still intact. There was something uneasy in her eyes. She didn't ask directly, but I could see her scanning, our voices, our pauses, our glances, looking for cracks. One evening, she and I took a walk along the river. The air was cool, smelling of wet leaves, and mist curled above the water like time exhaling. "Dad," she said, "are you really okay?" I chuckled, seeing the worry on her face. "Do I not look okay?" "You look like you're trying to be okay." "That's not the same." We stopped near a bench. I sat down. She stayed standing, hands in her pockets. "Are you angry with her?" she asked. "No," I said. "I'm angry at myself. For thinking that just being around was enough. Turns out, it isn't. And I'm angry that it took another man to wake me up. I remember how Mom used to sit by the window in the mornings when I was little," she said softly. She wasn't looking out. She wasn't thinking. It was like, she was vanishing. And you were always in the garage. Or fixing the roof. Or just, not talking. I looked out at the river. You know, I used to think that silence meant everything was fine. But silence can be worse than shouting. We just never learned to speak. She nodded. Then suddenly sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder, like she did when she was a kid, afraid of thunderstorms. "I'm glad you two are trying again," she whispered. "But Dad, don't lose it again." That evening at home, I dug out an old box of notebooks. One of them was Eleanor's, full of her writing. I remembered how she used to write short stories. How she once dreamed of publishing a collection. But then June was born. Then came renovations, work, and the dream got shelved. And I, fool that I was, forgot. Or worse, didn't value it. At dinner, I set the notebook in front of her. "Were you looking for this?" She jumped a little, like she'd seen a ghost. "God, you found it?" "Never lost it. Just didn't notice. Like so many other things." She gently took it, flipping through the pages. Yellowed, scribbled with slanted lines full of tears, laughter, life. Her life. "I haven't written in 20 years, she whispered. "I don't know if I can anymore." "Try," I said. "No pressure. Just because you want to." The next morning, I woke to a soft rustling. She was sitting at the kitchen table, in her robe, coffee beside her, pen in hand. Writing. Slowly, with pauses. Focused. As if every word was a step back toward herself. I didn't interrupt. Just sat across from her, opened the paper, poured my coffee. We didn't speak. But there was no emptiness between us. Just presence. Sometimes, saying, "I love you," doesn't take words. Sometimes, it's just being there. Fully. Since that morning I saw Eleanor at the table with a pen in hand, the house felt different. The air had changed, not scented with lavender, not buzzing with joy, but something living had returned. Something quietly growing. She began writing regularly. At first in the mornings, while I was still fussing with the toaster and making coffee. Then during the day, carving out an hour of silence between errands. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night and hear the faint creak of the chair in the living room. Her silhouette, hunched over her notebook in the dim light, became a symbol for me, of something I had almost lost, but maybe, just maybe, could still hold on to. I never asked to read her words. Never insisted. She was the one who placed a handwritten page in front of me one evening. "It's not a story," she said. "Just thoughts. But I want you to know what's inside me." I read it. Slowly. Twice. There was pain in it. Not blame, not accusations, just the pain of a witness. Someone who had watched her life from the outside and didn't know how to step back in. She wrote that she felt like a house no one lived in anymore. That every later from me sounded like never. That the silence between us had become like furniture, familiar, comfortable, but lifeless. When I finished, my throat was tight. I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound cheap. So I walked over, held her, and said, "I'm home." She didn't reply, just nodded. But I knew, she understood. We grew closer. Not in the way people think, not like newlyweds rediscovering lust. Closer in a truer way. Mentally. Trustfully. She began to share thoughts, and I listened. And slowly, I started sharing too. About the garage, my dreams, my fatigue, my fears. We started talking not about what had to be said, but about what needed to be felt. One day she invited me to her literary club, the same one where she'd met Gerald. She said she wanted to return, but not as someone hiding, as someone supported. "You won't feel out of place?" she asked. "I'll be beside you. That's all that matters." The room was small, in the library. Most folks were around our age. Some wore glasses, some scarves. All had curiosity and a gentle tiredness in their eyes. We sat near the edge. Eleanor read a passage from her new story. Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. Afterward, a man came up to me. Solid, silver-haired, with kind eyes. "Chuck, right?" "I'm Gerald." Something tightened in my chest. But I nodded. "Thanks for being there when I wasn't." He didn't smile. Just nodded. "Take care of her. She matters, not just to you." And he walked away. I didn't feel jealousy. I felt gratitude. And a quiet, grown-up kind of ache, the kind you feel when you know you've failed, but still have time to fix it. On the way home, Eleanor was silent. Then she said, "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't think I would either," I replied. "But I don't regret it. It meant a lot to me. That you heard not just me, but who I've become." I took her hand. "I hear you. And I see you." For the first time in a long while, truly. Autumn had settled in. Leaves rustled underfoot like old letters, forgotten, but not lost. Eleanor and I began spending more time outdoors, not to escape the house, but to miss it. Our walks became rituals. We didn't ask whether to go. We just put on jackets, grabbed blankets and a thermos of tea, and headed out, to the park, the lake shore, even the bench behind the supermarket that always smelled like bread. Those hours were filled with silence, but not emptiness. It was the kind of silence where words ripen. One evening, Eleanor said, "I feel like myself again. Not someone's wife, or mother, or neighbor. Just, me." I looked at her and realized, I'd never asked who she was beyond all the roles. I knew how she took her coffee, no sugar, with cinnamon. I knew she hated frogs, dreamed of living in a lighthouse as a kid. But who was she now, with June grown and the garage no longer needing her patience? Who was she without us? And do you know who you are? I asked. She smiled. I'm starting to remember. What about you? I paused. Who was I if not a mechanic, not a father, not a husband on autopilot? If you stripped away the habits, the debts, the routines, what was left? I didn't know. But for the first time in years, I wanted to find out. I was curious, not afraid. We started trying new things. Small ones. She invited me to a ceramics exhibit. I was bored out of my mind, but stayed. I dragged her to a baseball game. She didn't understand a single rule but shrieked with joy every time someone scored. It felt like unfolding a map with only the two of us on it. No June. No past. Just us. But life never lets you relax for long. One day she came back from the doctor. Her face was calm, too calm. Everything okay? I asked. She sat down, unpacked groceries like nothing had happened. Then she sighed. They found a growth. They don't know yet if it's malignant. I need a biopsy. Everything inside me dropped. I could see she was trying to stay strong. Not because she wasn't scared, but because she was scared for me. When? In 3 days. I didn't want to tell you right away. Thought maybe it'd turn out to be nothing. We're going together, I said. Don't play the hero, Chuck. This isn't a movie. No. It's about us. If not now, then when? Those 3 days felt like glass. Clear. Fragile. We didn't talk about the bad. We ate ice cream, watched old movies, played vinyl records. She put her perfume-scented pillow back on our bed. I followed her around the house like a puppy, and she laughed. If this turns out to be the end, she said one evening, then let it be like this, with pie and you, not tubes and dread. I didn't let myself cry. Just nodded. But that night, when she fell asleep, I sat by the window and wept. Not from fear, but from the aching realization that I'd only just begun to be a real husband. The day of the biopsy came. We sat in the waiting area, holding hands. People in white coats passed by, people with fears, with silent prayers. My heart clenched, not with horror, but with love. With how deeply I didn't want to lose her. When they called her name, she turned back to me and said, "No matter what they say, I'm already home." The results came on the 4th day. We didn't go to the clinic. Eleanor insisted the doctor call us at home. If it's a sentence, she said, I want to hear it in a place where the walls know how I cry. When the phone rang, she stood by the window, as if searching the sky for an answer. I sat at the table, every part of me frozen. She listened, nodded, closed her eyes once. Then she slowly sat on the floor, her back to the cabinet. Benign, she said. I exhaled like I'd been holding my breath since the moment she went to the doctor. You're sure? I asked stupidly, as if the doctor could change his mind. Yes, she nodded. But you know what's the strangest thing? I'm not screaming. I'm not crying. I just realized how much I want to live. Not just survive, live. I sat beside her. We didn't touch. We didn't speak. Just sat. In that silence where every breath feels like a promise. The next day we went back to a place we hadn't visited in years, an old park on the edge of town where we used to walk with June, where we kissed on a lilac-scented bench. Everything felt smaller. Trees, shorter, pond, shallower. But the air was the same. Clean, full of fallen leaves and memories. We sat on that same bench. Its paint was chipped, the boards creaked. But it held us, just like before. I thought, if it all ended, she said, I wouldn't regret the countries I didn't visit, or the books I didn't write. I'd regret that we spent so many years together, but not really together. I'd regret not hearing you when you were silent, I admitted. Regret pretending everything was fine instead of asking, are you okay? And now? Now I want to rediscover you every day. So I won't lose you again. She laughed through her tears. Then buckle up. I'm not who I was at 30. Or the one who used to leave notes in your pockets. I'm changing. But I'm still me. We came home. And since then, everything's been quieter, but warmer. We're not a perfect couple. We still argue about silly things. She forgets to close the fridge. I leave socks in the chair. But now we notice each other. Our faults. Our fears. One day June came over with her daughter. The little girl ran around the yard collecting yellow leaves, while June stood on the porch watching us. I don't recognize you, she said. You're different. Softer. Lighter. Like, you started over. We didn't start over, I said. We just decided not to end. Eleanor finished her story. Her first in 25 years. It wasn't about us, but I saw everything in it. A woman who had lost her voice and found it again through a stranger's letter. A local paper published it. I bought every copy. Not for pride, though I was proud. For memory. To preserve what we nearly lost. Some evenings, we play a record. Sit together. She with a glass of wine, me with warm tea. She rests her head on my shoulder. I hold her hand. And we're quiet. But in that silence, there's no loneliness. There's warmth. There's us. Sometimes I think about death. Not with terror like before, but like a neighbor you haven't met yet but know exists. We haven't shaken hands, but I've stopped hiding. Because now I know, I've lived. Not merely existed, not rushed through the days, but truly lived, with mistakes, with pain, with hope. And most importantly, not alone. We started leaving notes on the fridge. Not reminders. Just words. Sometimes, the morning is beautiful. Sometimes, I thought of you on the train. One time, I found a note that said, thank you for not giving up. I keep it in my wallet like a lucky charm. That's how we build our new now. Bit by bit. Without grand gestures. Without guarantees. But with love, the kind that doesn't ask for applause. The kind that stays when everything else falls away. The old man who once said, happiness is being understood, was damn right. But you know, with age, I've realized that happiness is also when you begin to understand yourself. The one beside you. When you stop living on autopilot and start noticing, a glance, a pause, an unspoken, I'm sorry. Eleanor and I didn't become characters in a romance novel. We remained ordinary, with creaky chairs, untimely resentments, and silly habits. But we learned one important thing, to listen to the silence. Because sometimes, it speaks the loudest. Now let me ask you. Yes, you, the one who read all the way to the end. When was the last time you looked someone in the eyes and didn't expect a reply, just stayed close? When was the last time you said, I'm here? No strings attached. When did you last hug someone, not to comfort, but just to be with them? Maybe now is the perfect time. If this story spoke to you, consider subscribing. I'd love to know you're out there, even just through a screen. And I've got more stories to tell. Like how Grandma won the lottery and hid the money in a jar of pickles. Or the time I accidentally became a volunteer. Or, well, you'll see. Thank you for being with me. Until next time.